Welcome to Module 2 of the Vaccine Education Outreach Program. This is part of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Immunization and Vaccines for Children grant project. This project aims to provide support for improving vaccination rates in the city of San Antonio and Bexar County. The San Antonio Metropolitan Health District, or Metro Health, on behalf of the city of San Antonio, has partnered with ADMT Solutions Home Health to assist with vaccine education outreach. When it comes to our mission and value proposition, ADMT Solutions delivers compassionate, caring services to help our clients and patients improve their quality of life. Our service delivery will demonstrate that we are the team, always doing more than, to meet each client's needs. Before watching this presentation, be sure to fill out the pre-test for this session. The name of this presentation is The Nuts and Bolts of Vaccines. At the end of this presentation, you will be able to explain how vaccines work, describe the side effects associated with vaccines, discuss how vaccines in general are developed, tested, authorized, and monitored in the U.S., discuss how COVID vaccines specifically were developed, and promote the recommended vaccination schedules, which includes vaccines for kids, adolescents, pregnant people, adults, and seniors, and also define what it means for a vaccine to be recommended but not required. So how do vaccines work? Vaccines work by showing a weakened version of the germ, or just a piece of it, something that it makes like a protein, so that our bodies can learn how to identify the germ and learn how to fight it. That way, if you come across the real germ, your body already has a head start in fighting it off. This is a little like training your army before war begins. If you wait until you're in the middle of a battle to learn what the enemy looks like and how to fight them, it'll be a lot harder to defend yourself. But if you train your soldiers ahead of time, they will be ready and waiting when the battle begins. So question, true or false? Vaccines only protect the individual. Answer, false. Vaccines work in two ways. The graphic shows how some potential and sometimes expected vaccine side effects. One important thing to point out is that anytime you experience a severe or serious symptom following vaccination, such as trouble breathing, that qualifies as a medical emergency, you should call 911. Most vaccine side effects are nearly always temporary and manageable. Just like any medical product, vaccines benefit, but they can also carry risk. When our body defenses, our immune system, respond to a germ or vaccine, we can feel certain side effects from that. Fever, for example, is a natural defense our body uses to protect ourselves from perceived threats by increasing our body temperature and making it an unsuitable environment for germs to grow. Likewise, that sore arm you may get after getting a flu vaccine is a bunch of your body's cells rushing to the site where you were vaccinated. These are uncomfortable side effects, yes, but they can also be a good sign that your body is responding to the vaccine. Some of the most common side effects are getting vaccinated with any vaccine include fever, soreness or pain where you got the shot, tiredness, headache, or just generally feeling crummy. These side effects almost always go away on their own after a few days. In some cases, over-the-counter pain relievers like Tylenol or Advil can help relieve some of the side effects, but those should only be taken after the vaccine, not before, and only as long as you're normally allowed to take them. For example, you don't have an allergy to these types of medications. Vaccines affect everyone differently. People are unique. And while one person might have a lot of side effects after vaccination, another person might feel no, or might not feel anything at all. That said, in some cases, the risk of side effects can vary by vaccine, as well as by age and gender. Some common side effects of vaccination, including the COVID-19 vaccination, include headache, fever and chills, nausea, tiredness, muscle aches, and soreness at the injection site. Serious side effects from the vaccination are rare. In fact, people are much more likely to get seriously injured from a disease like COVID than they are by the vaccines. It's important to share information about what serious risk might be connected to a vaccine so that we can be transparent and protect the trust we built with our communities as community health workers, if you are one. These rare but serious potential reactions to vaccines are always listed on the paperwork people receive at the vaccination sites. These are called Vaccine Information Statements, or VISs. These documents outline the risks and benefits of vaccines in plain language. These documents can be found in a number of languages on the website shown on this slide. You can also go to Vaccinate Your Family website at www.vaccinateyourfamily.org to learn more about vaccine safety and potential effects. So, question: what do you think has to meet a higher standard of safety? Vaccines or vitamins? Answer: of course, vaccines. Unlike vaccines, multivitamins do not have to go through safety testing before being sold in the US or prove to regulators that they are safe or work like they're supposed to. Vaccines, on the other hand, go through a lot of testing and have to prove that they're safe and work well before they're allowed to be used in the US. Before vaccines can be approved, they have to be tested to make sure they're safe and work like they're supposed to. Researchers often state that testing in the laboratory, first in cells, then in animals, when they think they have a good vaccine candidate, they apply the test to vaccine in adult volunteers. The first phase of human or clinical trials only involves a small number of people to make sure that the vaccine is safe and doesn't cause any serious side effects. They also look at things like how the dose affects uh, the body and how the body responds. If everything looks good in this particular phase, then the candidate moves on to phase 2, which generally has a larger population of people, hundreds instead of dozens. In this phase, researchers are looking at, again, is the vaccine safe? Are people responding to the vaccine by making antibodies? And 3, what are the side effects? If the vaccine looks like it's safe and it works in that phase, then it'll move on to phase 3 trials, which are typically really large, generally including thousands, if not tens of thousands of people, some of whom who will get the vaccine, some of whom who will get a placebo. In this third phase, researchers are looking at number 1, is the vaccine safe? Number 2, does it work? And most importantly, number 3, how do people who get the vaccine compare to those who didn't? This third phase tells us how effective the vaccine was at protecting people from getting sick. We all often get the question, if no safety steps were skipped, how were COVID-19 vaccines made so quickly? Well, in addition to emergency use authorization for COVID-19 vaccines, there were several things that helped speed things along for researchers, while still checking every regulatory box to ensure the vaccine was safe and effective. Researchers didn't start from scratch. Scientists have been studying vaccines for over 200 years, mRNA for decades, and coronaviruses since the SARS outbreak in the early 2000s. Vaccine scientists were able to use earlier research to quickly make a vaccine candidate that they could study. They also didn't have to wait around for funding. And because they had funding, vaccine makers made large batches of the vaccine before they knew whether it worked. Like funding, it can be tough for researchers to recruit volunteers. They can spend a long time getting enough people to sign up for every stage of their clinical trials. But due to the pandemic, tens of thousands of volunteers raised their hands to participate to help vaccine efforts. In order for researchers to know whether their vaccines work, they have to get enough cases of the disease in unvaccinated participants in order to compare the results. Public health agencies and pharmacies knew a vaccine was coming and so spent months preparing how they were going to transport, store, and distribute the vaccine. Also, real people were behind the development of the COVID vaccines, and the COVID vaccine had far more diversity in clinical trials than we usually see. So, question: true or false? Vaccines continue to be tested for safety even after they've been authorized or approved. Answer: it is true. Even after a vaccine is approved, health officials continue to check to make sure the vaccine is safe and works like it's supposed to. They do this by testing batches of vaccines to make sure they're safe, inspecting facilities where vaccines are made to make sure there aren't any red flags or safety issues, using multiple systems to spot warning signs early in case there are risks that didn't show up during clinical trials. For example, if the side effects were too rare. So let's discuss vaccine schedules. Every year, the ACIP meets multiple times a year to go over the latest data on vaccines, vaccine side effects, and vaccine preventable diseases. And they update the recommended vaccine schedule to make sure they are as safe and protective as possible. You can find the most recent immunization schedules on the CDC's website. So when do we vaccinate? The bulk of vaccines that people receive are during the first few years of life, but we need vaccines throughout our lifetimes to stay protected. The reason we vaccinate children against so many diseases is because these diseases can be especially dangerous for young children. So we vaccinate children as early as possible to protect them when they're the most vulnerable. The immunization schedule you see on this slide is actually outdated because we now have the ability to protect children against 16 different diseases by age 6. And COVID vaccination is recommended for everyone 6 months or older. Some people might worry that there are a lot of shots given close together, but because of advances in vaccine technology, the recommended vaccine schedule is actually safer than any vaccine schedule in history. And it's more protective too. Vaccines help us from diseases that used to cause widespread sickness, disability, and death. So when do we vaccinate? Vaccines are important for adolescents too. Preteens and teenagers should be vaccinated against HPV, Tdap, flu, meningitis, and COVID-19. And vaccines aren't just for children and adolescents. Adults need vaccines too. Adults should get an annual flu vaccine, a Tdap booster every 10 years, and an annual COVID-19 vaccine. Adults should also catch up on any vaccines that they may not have received as a child or adolescent. Pregnant women should get a flu vaccine, a Tdap vaccine during every pregnancy, and a COVID-19 vaccine. Adults 50 and older should get a shingles vaccine and a pneumococcal vaccine. The recommendation for pneumococcal vaccination just changed from 65 years to 50 years. In addition to shingles and pneumococcal, adults should get an RSV vaccine. The recommendation for RSV vaccine included everyone 75 years and older and high-risk individuals with chronic medical conditions who are 60 to 74 years old. Safety is a priority. CDC's recommended immunization schedules are the only vaccine schedules in the U.S. that have been routinely tested for safety and effectiveness. Some families think that spacing out vaccines or picking and choosing which vaccines their child should receive can better protect their child from potential side effects. In fact, these spaced out or alternative schedules aren't tested for safety and effectiveness, so we don't know how well they work. Spacing out vaccines can also leave people vulnerable to dangerous diseases. The CDC immunization schedules are updated every year by a group of independent experts who review the latest research and data. These schedules are designed to protect people as early and as often as possible. So let's talk about recommended versus required. Some families mistakenly believe that if a vaccine isn't required for school, then it's more optional or less important than the vaccines that are required. But that's not true. There are actually just two different schedules made by two separate groups. The CDC's recommended vaccination schedule is set by the ACIP and updated every year to reflect the latest research in vaccines and vaccine preventable diseases. So here's a reflection question. If a friend asked you to explain how vaccines were tested for safety, how would you summarize the process? For more information about vaccine schedules and vaccine safeties, visit these websites. Well, that concludes our Module 2 on the nuts and bolts of vaccines. Thank you for listening, and be sure to fill out the post-test for this session so that you can get credit. Thank you.